What's up everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Brad and we're back at it again. Today, I'm going to give you an update on what my Fiddle Leaf Fig looks like post-chop. If you remember, I did a big chop on my Fiddle Leaf Fig about 4 weeks ago. Last week, I recorded a video showing what my Fiddle Leaf Fig looked like post-chop. Now what I want to do is I want to give you a weekly update about what the Fiddle Leaf Fig looks like now. My idea is to continue to give you an update every week of the growth of my Fiddle Leaf Fig, as well as tips and tricks of what I'm doing to make sure that I activate as many notes as possible to get as many branches as possible on my Fiddle Leaf Fig. This way, it will encourage you too to give your Fiddle Leaf Fig a big chop if you want to give it a refresh. All right, let's get into it. Here's the status of my Fiddle Leaf Fig 1 week after the previous video that I made about the big chop, but about 4 weeks after I actually did the big chop. Like I said, I'm going to be committed into giving you weekly updates just so you can see the progress of what the big chop looks like after the fact. Now, as you can see, I have gotten a substantial amount of growth since last week's video. What I have found is after a big chop, it takes the longest to actually get your nodes to activate. Once your nodes activate, you should start to see some really incredible growth. So as you can see, I have active growth from this node here. I have 1, 2, let's see if I can find some other ones, 3, 4. So I have 4 active growth points that I can see on this particular branch. On the second branch here, I have an active growth point here. I have an active growth point here. And I have 3 additional growth points here, here, and here. And then finally, on the third stem or branch, I have an active growth point here. I have an active growth point here. I have another one coming out right here. Are there any other ones? So that's all I see so far on this one. But the tree is really flushing out really nicely. I'm also, even though the ground is wet, my soil is wet, and it's an overcast day, I'm still gonna fertilize this Fiddle Leaf Fig because I want to make sure that I continue to encourage that push of growth. If you don't fertilize, what might end up happening is you will get an initial burst of growth out of one of your growth points, but then it will be stunted. So only one of the 2 or 3 growth points will continue to go and flush out. If you like videos like this and want to continue to see weekly updates of what my Fiddle Leaf Fig looks like post-chop, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. It's totally free and would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. And here's Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2. It only has 1 main trunk, but it still has a lot of active growth points. So I have an active growth point right where my finger is on the right side. I have one on the left side. I have another one on the left side. I have one coming out right above my finger. Let's see if I can see any more. I have another one right there where my finger is. I have another one right there. And then I have 2 more trying to push out down here, but I don't want growth right here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and knock those off. That way I can focus on branches where I actually want the growth. And like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and still fertilize this even though the soil is wet, even though the ground is wet, and even though it's an overcast day, because I want to continue to feed my tree. So that is what my Fiddle Leaf Fig looks like 4 weeks post-chop and 1 week after my previous video that I made. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you on the next one where I give you another update of what my Fiddle Leaf Fig looks like post-chop. What's up everyone, we're back at it again. My name is Brad and welcome back to my channel. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you another update on my Fiddle Leaf Fig. It's that time. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago, I started to film the progress of my Fiddle Leaf Fig post-chop. The first video that I made was about 3 to 4 weeks where you can start to see the buds forming on the individual nodes of my branches on my Fiddle Leaf Fig. The second video that I posted was a week after that. Now this video is going to be 2 weeks after you start to see those buds forming on my branches of my Fiddle Leaf Fig. The reason why I want to document the progress of the Fiddle Leaf Fig is so I can show you that you should not be afraid to give your Fiddle Leaf Fig a big chop, especially if you want to reinvigorate it, and especially if you want to start getting those big, beautiful branches that really give the Fiddle Leaf Fig a true, wonderful form. So without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, so here's the first Fiddle Leaf Fig that I started off with. Now, as you can see, this Fiddle Leaf Fig looks quite a bit different, and I'm going to show you where I am talking about. So for this branch, unfortunately, I have a casualty. This node that had growth on it the prior week, unfortunately, was mowed down by a deer. So that's unfortunate, but I still do have this node here that is starting to form a branch, and it's also forming big leaves underneath this brown protective covering right here. Now, the reason why I'm a bit disappointed that this got chewed up is because what I wanted to happen was I wanted this branch to essentially go up and give it nice vertical growth without necessarily interfering with the middle of the tree. So let's see if we can find any more nodes. So we do have active growth forming here as well. So this is a second active growth point. And as we are coming down, we have full leaves that are forming here. So we have an active growth point here, an active growth point here, and an active growth point here. I believe last week these leaves weren't yet unfurled, so that's pretty exciting. On this main branch, as you can see, the leaves are really coming together. Now, whenever you perform a big chop, the first few leaves that come out are going to be on the smaller end, but don't worry. As your new branches start to become more mature, your leaves are going to become much bigger. So you're going to get those huge fiddle shaped leaves that are going to be larger than your hand. It will come probably in the next 2 or 3 sets of leaves. I'm going to start seeing that. And then right here, I also have another casualty. So there was an active growth point here, but again, a deer mowed it down. So that's a bit disappointing because again, I wanted to have nice growth that was going to come perpendicular or even at a 45-degree angle of this branch. But I still do have an active growth point here, so we'll see what happens as this matures. And then as we go further down, we do see that we continue to have our active growths forming down closer to the union of the branch and the trunk. So that's exciting. Now, if we go all the way down here, you'll see that we have a nice little baby leaf that has come out of the trunk. I'm just gonna go ahead and pluck this off because I really don't want any growth down here. And I'm also gonna get rid of this little weed. And once I show you my second Fiddle Leaf Fig, I'm gonna go ahead and water this with fertilizer as well, especially since a deer unfortunately mowed these 2 nodes down. That fertilizer is gonna help make sure that I get that additional boost of food. Now here's the second Fiddle Leaf Fig. Again, this is 1 week after the previous video. So a lot of active growth is happening here. So let's get into it. So right here, we have leaves that are forming underneath this brown protective covering. These leaves are probably going to be a decent size, and this was actually much smaller last week. We also have 2 leaves that have formed right here, and another set of leaves. Probably there are 2 leaves underneath this brown protective covering that are forming. We also have an active growth point here, active growth point here, active growth point here, active growth point here. And let's see if there are any more. We do have an active growth point here. That might be pretty interesting to see develop and grow, so I think I'm gonna leave that alone. But when we come right here, I'm gonna go ahead and remove that because there's no use in having two branches that are coming off of the trunk on the same side as far as the look that I'm going for. And then we also have a little growth point here that I'm also gonna just get rid of as well. So a lot of progress has been made with these Fiddle Leaf Figs in just 1 week. And again, I'm gonna go ahead and fertilize them. If you like videos like this and wanna continue to see more videos about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and would mean a lot. Now, let's get back into how I fertilize these Fiddle Leaf Figs after the big chop. When it comes to fertilizing these Fiddle Leaf Figs after the big chop, there are really two things that I need. I need a gallon jug as well as my liquid fertilizer. I'm gonna show you the ratios that I use for my Fiddle Leaf Fig. Now, this might be a little controversial and that's okay. Now, after the big chop, what I like to do is I like to give my Fiddle Leaf Fig a double dose of fertilizer. So that means instead of giving it 1 tablespoon per gallon, I give it about 2 tablespoons per gallon. This will help give my Fiddle Leaf Fig that boost that it needs as it begins to figure out where it wants its growth points to generate. If you don't fertilize, you might be limited in the amount of branches that you have. If you do fertilize, you will get more branching, and if you double fertilize, chances are that you'll get even more branching. So I just like to pour some of my liquid fertilizer into here. Now, I've done this enough times to where I really have an idea of what a double dose of fertilizer looks like. So in here, I have about 2 tablespoons of liquid fertilizer, and I'm gonna pour it in to my gallon jug, like so. Now, after I do that, I'm just gonna fill up the water. And it's really that simple. Again, I like to do a double dose of fertilizer so I can increase the chances of my Fiddle Leaf Fig having multiple branches on the stem. Now, this is even gonna be more important now that I have that damage on two of my branches where the deer unfortunately ate some of my Fiddle Leaf Fig. There's no way that tasted good, but I hope they enjoyed their salad. So now I'm gonna take you outside as I water these plants. So there's something that I wanna point out here as far as watering these Fiddle Leaf Figs go. Typically, you hear that you should not water your Fiddle Leaf Fig or really tropical houseplants until about a couple of inches of the soil is dry. If you look at this soil here, that's not the case. This soil is still pretty wet. And I know that it's wet because if I stick my finger down into it, the soil will stick to my finger. I want to make sure you can see that. So this soil is still damp. Now, the reason why I am going to fertilize my Fiddle Leaf Fig anyway is twofold. My Fiddle Leaf Fig is outside, so because it's outside, it's going to use more water. It's going to use more water because it has more intense sun, and because of the more intense sun, it's going to photosynthesize more efficiently. And the second reason is because when it's outside, it's getting hit with a lot of wind. So when this Fiddle Leaf Fig is getting hit with wind, and as these leaves start to form on this Fiddle Leaf Fig, water is actually going to evaporate from these leaves. So even though it's pulling water up from the soil, you're also losing water via evaporation. So your Fiddle Leaf Fig needs to try and keep its hydration up while it's outside. So I'm gonna go ahead and fertilize these Fiddle Leaf Figs, both of them, because again, on this one as well, you'll see that the soil is damp. It's not dry by any means. I will not get root rot on these Fiddle Leaf Figs. Okay, so here's my gallon jug that I filled up with my double fertilizer, and I'm gonna pour about half of this gallon jug in here. And then I'm gonna pour the other half into my other Fiddle Leaf Fig pot. And we see water flowing all the way through, coming out of the bottom, which is excellent because that is how you ensure that your entire root ball is getting saturated. All right, so I have now fertilized and watered both of my Fiddle Leaf Figs, and I will come back next week with an update of what the growth looks like. Hopefully I won't have any more damage from deer. If I do, obviously I'll show you. If I don't, fingers crossed, that will be even better. If you have any other tips or tricks about how you take care of your Fiddle Leaf Figs post big chop, please be sure to leave them down in the comments because I would love to learn from you as well. I hope this video is helpful, and I hope this series is giving you the confidence that if you give your Fiddle Leaf the big chop, you will not kill your plant. These trees are very, very resilient. All right, I'll see you next week in the series of giving my Fiddle Leaf Fig a big chop. Thank you so much for watching. What's up, plant lovers? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Brad, and we're back at it again. Today, what I want to do is I want to do something similar to what I've done with my Fiddle Leaf Fig, and that is show you what the progress of my Ficus elastica taniki looks like after giving it the big chop. Similar to the Fiddle Leaf Fig, I gave my Ficus elastica a big chop about 5 weeks ago, and since then it's done some pretty interesting things. I want to show you what the progress of this looks like so it can give you the courage to give your tree the big chop as well, and to know that your tree will not die. If anything, what it will do is it will give your tree the characteristics that a Ficus elastica taniki might look like in the wild, as well as give it characteristics that might get your friends and family talking about just how cool it looks. So let's get to it. So this is my Ficus elastica taniki, and I also did a big chop on this Ficus elastica as well. I did this at about the same time as my Fiddle Leaf Fig, so this is going to be on the same pace. I decided to go ahead and start tracking the progress of what it looks like after the big chop for this particular plant, just so I can see what the differences are with the Fiddle Leaf Fig. So we're going to call this a week 5, but on the post I'm going to say week 2, just so we can be on the same track. So this is about 2 weeks after the nodes started to form, or the growth started to form off of the nodes of the main trunk of my Ficus elastica taniki. Now you'll notice too, or what I find interesting when I do these big chops, is that the leaves always start off much smaller than what the mature leaves look like. So these leaf sets are going to continue to get bigger until it will eventually reach the size of my hand. That's how it was before I did the big chop. If you can see here, this leaf on the left is older than the leaf on the right, and this leaf on the left is also smaller than the leaf on the right. So I expect for this new leaf that's coming out to be bigger than this leaf right here. We can see that there are a couple of growth points that will allow for this particular tree to be absolutely beautiful once it matures a little bit more. So we have a growth point here, 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 so that's 4. And then we have another set of 3 growth points further down the stem. And then we also have just a nice hefty trunk. If you like videos like this and want to continue to see more videos about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and it means a lot. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. A couple of notes here about how I'm taking care of this Ficus elastica taniki post chop. One of the main things that I'm doing is giving it full direct sunlight. Full direct sunlight is key in order to get the variegation on the leaves. I'm also doing a double dose of fertilizer every watering, which is every week, similar to my Fiddle Leaf Fig. That is also helping to encourage these multiple branches. So with the double fertilizer as well as the direct sunlight, so it gets about 6 hours of sun every single day, this is what the growth looks like so far. Do not be afraid to give your tree direct sunlight. The key is to make sure that you properly acclimate it. If you don't properly acclimate it, what you will find is these leaves will begin to scorch and burn. Eventually though, the new leaves that are put out will be able to withstand the intensity of the sun. If on the other hand you properly acclimate it, your older leaves will be able to eventually build up the tolerance to withstand the direct sunlight, and then the new leaves that come out will also withstand that direct sunlight. An additional thing that I want to point out is how thick this stem is. You'll hear different things about what encourages a thick stem. Some people say that a thick stem is just a matter of waiting for your plant to become more mature and become older. That isn't the case. What causes the thick stem is the movement of the stem itself. So by placing this particular tree outside, as well as my other trees during the growing season, it helps to encourage a nice strong stem that's going to be able to support the fresh flush of growth that is happening right now. If you don't put your tree outside, what you're going to end up having is a stem that might be a little too weak to support the growth. So you can begin to shake your tree, and you can do this every so often, and that should encourage the stem to thicken up, but you do have to do it pretty vigorously, and you want to make sure that you do it for a bit of time. By placing the tree outside, you have the wind that is constantly blowing, and it might get a total of, let's say, an hour's worth of movement in a 24-hour period, and you compound that, and that's how you get this thick stem here. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you can keep up with the progress of what my Ficus elastica taniki looks like post-chop. Again, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week when I give you an update on what the Ficus elastica taniki looks like then. See you on the next one. What's up, everyone? We're back at it again. My name is Brad, and welcome back to my channel. Today what I want to do is I want to give you a week 3 update on my Ficus elastica taniki, or a rubber tree. The reason why I want to give you an update is because I want to show you what the progress looks like between week 2 and week 3 and all of the beautiful growth that this particular tree has put on. So without further ado, let's get to it. Week 3 update of my Ficus elastica taniki, otherwise called a rubber tree. So as you can see, I've gotten a lot of progress since the week 2 update. Let's take a look at some of the changes that have happened since week 2. So as you can see, for this particular branch here, I have 3 leaves and I have a 4th leaf that is appearing as well. The second branch, I have 4 leaves with the 5th leaf appearing. This third branch here, I have 3 leaves with a 4th leaf starting to form. 2 leaves, 3 leaves, 3 leaves, and 3 leaves. So with the week 3 progress, I'll say that this particular Ficus elastica taniki is doing absolutely phenomenal. This again is one of my favorite Ficus elasticas because of the fact that it just has this beautiful variegated creamy color to it. Now I do also have a ruby. The ruby has just more of a pinkish tone to it, and that eventually does fade to more of this cream color. But with the taniki, pretty much all you get is the cream color. Just look at that beautiful leaf color. I've mentioned this before and I'll say it again. These leaves will get bigger. Now, obviously not the leaves that have essentially already matured, but the leaf sets that are going to come after these preceding leaves will just continue to become larger and larger until they're roughly about the size of my hand. You can kind of see that happening lower in the tree as well. So this leaf is larger than this leaf up here, but it will get bigger, or the leaves on this branch will get bigger. And you can just see what the growth pattern looks like here. My ultimate goal in doing the big chop for this particular Ficus elastica is to have multiple branches and multiple branches that are mature before the end of this growing season. So I think this tree is going to have a beautiful shape when I get that done. If you like videos like this and want to see more videos about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. One thing that I want to monitor while I'm outside, since it's finally sunny out, is I want to monitor the soil just to see what it looks like. Now, previously I had said that I wasn't going to do any watering because of the fact that this soil was staying pretty wet a lot longer than I anticipated. I had said before that I like to water once a week regardless of if the soil is wet or dry, but that usually only happens when the sun is sunny. But because I've had a lot of overcast days, the soil has just remained damp, so it hasn't really become necessary for me to do the watering as frequently as like I said, anticipated. I do want to call out that I just found this one little infant leaf here. Let's see if you can see it. That is starting to form by this branch. So we'll keep an eye on that, because I think this is high enough on the tree to where I won't mind having another branch come out. And then you can also see that I have additional activations that might decide to grow, or they might not. It's usually a 50-50 when you see this later growth about whether or not they'll develop or whether or not they'll just stay in this state. Now, if you do want to activate these branches, you can either do some kind of notching, or alternatively, you can just simply top off your tree, and that would most likely result in these branches becoming activated, or these nodes becoming activated. So I decided to take this Ficus elastica taniki out of its pot, just so you can see what the root ball looks like and why I am choosing not to water it right now. So again, we do have a lot of damp soil up top, but then if you look down here, you'll see that this is still really wet. And you can tell that it's really wet, not only by touching it, but just based on the color. It's a lot darker than what you would expect or what you want before watering again. So in order to keep these roots nice and healthy, I'm just gonna hold back on the watering for this week. As you can see that I have a lot of really strong root development that's happening here. And this is going to be a good size pot for my Ficus elastica taniki, and I'll probably keep it in here for a couple more years. Okay, so I also decided to do one last thing before wrapping up this video, and that is I want to put a marker on one of these branches so we can keep the orientation the same as we're monitoring the growth of what this Ficus elastica taniki looks like throughout the season. So our marker is going to be right on this top branch. I just tied a little black, wow, I can't see colors, a red ribbon around the top branch, and hopefully this is going to be able to help us in figuring out our right, our left, you know, and all of these branches that are all around. Because even though I haven't really rotated it that much yet, I am going to start rotating this probably about once a week, and I think it'd be really cool just to have a good reference point as we're comparing one week to another. And there you have it. That's the week 3 update of what my Ficus elastica taniki looks like after giving it the big chop. As I said in my previous video, I hope this gives you the courage to also give your tree a big chop, especially if you're trying to get some kind of reinvigoration or multiple branches. It truly is the easiest way. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you liked it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. I'll see you on the next video. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Brad, and we're back at it again. Today what I want to do is I want to give you an update on my Fiddle Leaf Fig. If you remember, a while ago I gave my Fiddle Leaf Fig a big chop. Actually, 2 Fiddle Leaf Figs, the big chop. And since then I've been documenting the progress of what my Fiddle Leaf Figs look like post-chop. I started off at week 0. Week 0 was really the point where we started to see some development on the nodes of my Fiddle Leaf Fig. And the reason why I wanted to start there is because it takes a while for those nodes to develop. The key to getting those nodes to develop was to not only do the big chop, but also ensure that my Fiddle Leaf Figs were placed in an area that got really bright sunlight and giving it that double dose of fertilizer. So in order to give it that bright sunlight that it needed, I just simply placed it outside, which it has absolutely loved. Week 1, I started to see some leaves develop from those leaf nodes, and with week 2, I started to see even more growth. Now I'm going to take you outside so you can see what week 3 looks like. Week 3. Week 3, you can see that the leaves are starting to become more mature, and you can see that the leaves are also developing a darker green color. So the leaves are getting past that infancy stage that we first saw when this plant was beginning to bud out. Now, there really isn't much difference, in my opinion, between last week and this week, but I do think that I am starting to get some additional growth or more activated leaf nodes on this particular branch here. So if you remember, this is one of the branches where I had that deer damage. That was right here. For the deer damage, I was a bit disappointed because I wanted to have this vertical offshoot that would be coming towards me and up. But now it looks like I do have a growth point here, and I do have another little growth point here as well as here. Now I'm hoping that with the fertilization that I've been giving this Fiddle Leaf Fig, that those growth points will fully mature, because sometimes what happens is that these growth points or these buds will swell initially, but you really won't have any growth. So I'm going to keep an eye on this particular stem. When we look over here, we see, again, this is the second branch that had that leaf damage. I do have this bud that is starting to grow out a little bit more, and I have this secondary bud right here as well. So hopefully in a couple of weeks time, these buds will swell and I'll get some leaf formation. And then let's see if I have anything else. Nothing really else to note here. And then finally we have these leaves that have formed closer to the base of the stem, or at this union here, which look great. Now, when we look at these leaves, you'll see what I mean here about how the leaves have become a bit more full, as well as they become darker. So this is good. This is what you want to see. Initially, when these leaves come out, they're more of a lime green color as opposed to a darker green color. But as they begin to age, they will become darker. Also, as they begin to age, they'll become more rigid as well. So if you look at this leaf, it's a little floppy, but in time, it's going to stiffen up as it matures. So this looks excellent. This is exciting. And this is my second Fiddle Leaf Fig, week 3. This one has also had some pretty exciting growth happen. So as you can see here, I had some swelling of the leaf bud. Remember when I said that 2 leaves were going to come out? Well, here's the first leaf, and this is the second leaf. Now, ignore these red speckles here. This darkening actually will go away as the leaf fully develops and matures. This typically happens when you have uneven watering. So that could be when you have spouts of extremely dry, then followed by extremely wet, and it has been extremely wet here lately. What is actually happening is the cell walls of these particular leaves are actually bursting. Bursting of the cell wall is what actually gives this discoloration. But like I said, as the leaf matures, this discoloration will go away. Here's the second leaf, or excuse me, here's the leaf that preceded that swollen bud that is also looking great. And then when we go here, we see something similar where we have had these leaves that are just bursting with energy. So this is going to be great. These leaves are going to be fairly good size. So I'm really excited to see that. And then when we come further down the stem, we see we have some leaves, or a branch that's forming off of this main stem. We have a branch here. And then we have activated node here and here. As we go further down, we also have this activation here as well. So this particular Fiddle Leaf Fig is also looking excellent. I'm excited to see these leaves get bigger and more mature, because I do want to have some movement in the stem. The reason why I want to have some movement in the stem is because I want this trunk to get even sturdier. The only way that's going to happen is if these leaves begin to develop and the stem of the Fiddle Leaf Fig has some additional movement to it, or the stem of the Fiddle Leaf Fig has something for the wind to catch onto, aka the leaves. So as this moves, the stem is going to get even more sturdier. So that's exciting to see. Love it. If you like videos like this and want to continue to see more videos about not only houseplant tips and tricks, but also want to follow along in the journey of what my Fiddle Leaf Figs look like post Big Chop, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. It's totally free and would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Let's take a look at the soil as well, because like I said, it has been very wet. And I know I said before that I like to water at least every single week with a double dose of fertilizer, but it has just been so wet here that I'm actually going to go back on that, and I'm not going to water this week. The reason why I want to hold off on watering this week is because when looking at the cell walls that burst that cause that reddening on the leaves that I was mentioning earlier, I don't want that to continue to happen, and the only reason why that's happening is because of the uneven watering. Secondly, I'm concerned about potentially having some root rot, and if I do have root rot, that's going to be another thing that I'm just going to have to try to combat when I'm trying not to stress my plant out too much. So this week I'm going to hold off. Hopefully I have some drier weather coming up, and with that drier weather, it's going to allow me to give it a nice dose of fertilizer the next watering. And then the same is going to be true for this Fiddle Leaf Fig here as well. The soil is just way too wet, so I'm going to hold off. So there you have it. That's the week 3 update of my Fiddle Leaf Fig. I'm excited to see what's going to happen during this week 3 to week 4 progress. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. I'll see you on the next video. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Brad, and we're back at it again. Today, what I want to do is I want to give you a week 4 update on my Ficus elastica taniki looks like post big chop. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago, I decided to give my Ficus elastica taniki the big chop in order to encourage additional branching, as well as to help it recover from some neglect that it had been experiencing over the previous months or so. So after giving it the big chop, I placed the Ficus elastica taniki outside to allow for it to get as much sunlight as possible. So it's in direct sunlight. It gets about 8+ hours of sunlight per day. For reference, I'm in USDA zone 8, so it does get relatively hot. So it's been about 90 degrees or so here in the afternoon, and it's been about 70 degrees at night. So the Ficus elastica taniki has been outside, and I have been giving it a double dose of fertilizing every watering, give or take a watering or so. So without further ado, let me take you outside so you can see what the Ficus elastica taniki looks like post big chop and after giving it that bright, direct sunlight. So here's the week 4 update of my Ficus elastica taniki. I took off the red wrapping that I had around this stem here because I wanted to be able to fully appreciate some of the growth that the Ficus elastica taniki has put on. So as you can see, it's starting to really come into its form. We have 3 branches on the bottom. We have 4 branches up top. We have a new leaf that has unfurled here. And then we have a leaf that is about to unfurl here. It's still underneath its protective sheath, so we're going to leave that alone. Leaf that's going to unfurl here, still underneath the protective sheath. Same for this one. And then all around. So next week, I imagine that I'm going to have probably an explosion of some new leaves that are going to come from this particular taniki. Now, some people do like to help their leaves out when they're under this protective sheath. You can't. It's really up to you. I like to just leave it alone because I don't want to risk damaging this new growth. So I'm going to leave that alone, and I'm not going to really mess with trying to help the leaf unfurl. But again, as you can see, it's really starting to put on that beautiful color and the beautiful variegation that the taniki is famous for. Now, when we come down here, again, we see that this soil is still pretty damp. I don't think I'm going to water today. I'm probably going to maybe water here in the next 2 days. We are going to have a lot of dry, hot weather here soon. So I'm going to wait to let this root ball dry up some before I water with some fertilizer. Just like before, I'm going to do a double dose of my liquid fertilizer, and I am going to completely saturate the root ball. So that means when I water from the top, I'm going to wait until I see water coming out of the bottom, and that's how I know that I've fully saturated it. So this looks good so far here. I also just wanted to provide you with a full 360 view of what the taniki looks like. Like I said, it's really starting to come into form, which is what I love to see. And I did mention before about how these leaves are fairly small, but with time, they actually will get larger. So before I did the big chop on this Taniki, the leaves were about the size of my hand. So just imagine having a large colorful leaf about the size of my hand, just full of colorful variegation. It's absolutely stunning. That's why the Taniki is one of my favorite ficuses. If you like videos like this and want to see more videos about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and it would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. As a bonus, I'm going to go ahead and also show my Ficus elastica robusta. Now, I like this particular variety of ficus because it readily branches, meaning that you don't necessarily have to top it off to get all of the branching. As long as you give it some bright sunlight, you will get the branching. Now, I went ahead and topped this off anyway because I like to do it just if I am trying to achieve a certain look. And just look at all of the branches that it's put off. So I have a main branch. I have another main branch. I have another main branch here, another main branch here. I have branches that are still trying to form further down the stem. So this is absolutely a great tree to get, especially if you want something that will readily branch easily without you having to do too much. And one of the cool things that I like when you have trees that have these multiple branchings is I like to be able to see the leaves that are on different stages of unfurling. So for instance, we have this particular leaf that is in the process of unfurling. It just shed, or it's trying to shed, its protective sheath. We have another leaf here, hasn't yet shed its sheath. Another one that isn't as far along as the other two. And then we have some that really getting some swelling underneath the sheath, so we can probably expect to have a leaf burst here. So let me know in the comment section whether or not you want to have weekly updates on the Ficus elastica robusta, because if you do, I'll also add that into the loop as well. And then let me also show off my Ficus elastica standard. So this is not the robusta. This is really you can think of it as the parent of all of the other ficuses. Let me know if you want to also see a weekly update on these. Now, these do grow more slowly than the robusta, and it also, I'm finding that it grows more slowly than the Taniki. I did this big chop at the same time as the Fiddle Leaf Fig as well as the Taniki, and as you can see, I do have some branching. So I have 4 branches up top, I have a branch that's forming down here and a branch that's forming down here, but it's still not quite on the same pace as the Taniki that has, for instance, 4 leaves on this branch, 4 leaves on that branch. You know, I only have 2 leaves on this particular branch here. But if you want weekly updates on what or how long it takes for the Ficus elastica to branch and start forming leaves, let me know in the comment section, and I can also throw this into the rotation as well. So this is the Ficus elastica, which, as you can see, looks different from the Ficus robusta, which has more of that green leaf to it, which looks different from the Taniki, which has just the beautiful variegation to it. And then let me also throw this one in, the Ficus Audrey. So this one, just like the robusta, also readily branches, and I can throw this into the rotation as well if you want to see weekly updates of what it looks like or how long it takes for the Ficus robusta, or excuse me, the Ficus Audrey to grow. This one is growing really well, no topping needed, has a lot of branching, velvety leaves. This is probably one of my favorite ficuses as well. All ficuses are my favorite ficus. Thank you so much for watching this week's update of giving the Ficus elastica Taniki the big chop and what it looks like. I hope you enjoyed it, and as I've said in the other videos, I hope this gives you the courage to give your Taniki the big chop, knowing that it will be able to bounce back. Also, let me know in the comment section whether or not you would like to see weekly updates on what my robusta looks like, or the Audrey, or even just the Ficus elastica standard, because it is pretty interesting the rate in which they grow. It does vary. So if you would like to continue to see that documented, let me know in the comment section and I will be sure to film that as well and put that in the rotation. Again, my name is Brad. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next week when I give you an update on the Ficus elastica taniki. What's up everyone, we're back at it again. My name is Brad and welcome back to my channel. Today what I want to do is I want to give you a week 4 update of what my Fiddle Leaf Fig looks like post Big Chop. If you remember, several weeks ago I gave my Fiddle Leaf Fig the Big Chop. So that means what I did was, for the existing branches or stem, I pretty much just topped it off. I did this because I wanted to encourage additional top growth, and I also wanted to encourage additional branching. My Fiddle Leaf Fig had been struggling due to some construction that was going on in the house, and I essentially had to neglect the Fiddle Leaf Fig. But now with the Big Chop, I've begun to reinvigorate it. I'm also doing this because I want to encourage you to also give your Fiddle Leaf Fig the Big Chop if you find it necessary in order to give it that additional growth that you're looking for. So without further ado, let's get to it. So here's the week 4 update of my Fiddle Leaf Fig. Let's look at some of the changes and progress that have happened. So in looking at this particular side of the Fiddle Leaf Fig, you'll see that I'm having some leaf formation right underneath the sheath of this particular branch here, as well as here. Previously, that is in looking at weeks 3, 2, and 1, this wasn't nearly as swollen. So I'm expecting over the next week or so that this is going to fully develop into some leaves and we're gonna get some additional growth on these branches. Then we'll also notice that I have some additional branching that's forming here, as well as here. So I'm excited about this left side because if you recall, I had a deer eat this particular branch, but now I have this branch that's forming instead, which is still going to give me the outward growth that I'm looking for. And then if you look right here by my thumb, it's kind of hard to see, but I do have a branch that's starting to form on this node. Now, when going over to this particular branch, again, I had a deer eat this, unfortunately, but the leaf is finally sprouting from its sheath, which I love. So that is looking excellent. And then let's see here, what other kind of growth do I have? I have growth that is forming on this branch, as well as the branch underneath. Branch here and branch there. So this is looking absolutely beautiful. Let's just make sure I'm not missing anything else. Okay, doesn't look like I am. So far, the shape that this Fiddle Leaf Fig is going to have is, I'm going to have a branch coming out to the left, a branch coming out to the right, a branch that's going to move from this point to that point, from this point to that point, and then I might have some additional growth just coming straight up, which is good. So I did get some rain last night. That's fine. I am going to water this because I haven't watered this Fiddle Leaf Fig with some fertilizer in a while, and I want to make sure that I continue to feed it. I think this Fiddle Leaf Fig has probably had the most transformation as far as what the leaf size looks like in the development. So the leaves have gotten fairly large, and I do expect the leaves to get even larger. Same is true for this leaf as well. And then for the other leaf sets. And then if we look here, we do have some growth that's forming underneath this sheath. This sheath. This is looking excellent. And then, let's see, I think this is it for this one. So I think the biggest change for this particular Fiddle Leaf Fig is just the fact that the leaves have gotten bigger and they're getting more rigid. So right now this leaf is still fairly flimsy, but I do expect for it to harden off here over the next week or so. So it's going to become stiffer and it's not going to be this flimsy. And just like with the other one, I'm also going to go ahead and water it. I'm going to do what I always say that you should do after giving your Fiddle Leaf Fig or any plant the big chop, and that is to give it a double dose of fertilizer. Okay, double dose of fertilizer time. Gallon jug. Fertilizer that I use, this one has an NPK value of 312. Double it up. Pour it in. Fill it with water. So again, for this soil, I do not care that it's damp. It did have some time to dry off between week 3 and week 4. Otherwise, I would be concerned. I'm not concerned with root rot because I should get a lot more sun today, which is going to help dry this out. And then the same is going to be true for this Fiddle Leaf Fig as well. This is damp. You can see it's still sticking to my fingers. So I stick my finger in, pull it out, it's still wet. Now, if this were indoors, you wouldn't want to do that. What you'll want to do if this was indoors is you want to wait between waterings before you water. So you want to wait for the first couple of inches or so of the soil to dry out, and then you want to water. Remember, when your plants are placed outside, they are losing water not only from the surface of the soil, but they're also losing water when the wind hits the leaves and water essentially evaporates from the leaves. So your root ball will dry out more quickly when your plants are outside versus inside. Here's my double dose of fertilizer. I'm gonna do half in this pot. And I'm gonna do half in this pot. I'm gonna finish this off here. We have water flowing down, which is good. Expected. Awesome. I can't wait to see what week 5 has to bring with these 2 Fiddle Leaf Figs. And again, in every video that I've posted so far about this progress, I hope that this is giving you too the courage to give your Fiddle Leaf Fig the big chop if you want to encourage additional growth. Now, if you want some extra tips as far as how you can ensure that you get the maximum number of branches possible, be sure that you water your Fiddle Leaf Figs or fig with a double dose of fertilizer at least 1 week before you do the big chop. And then you want to continue to give your Fiddle Leaf Fig double the amount of food. That's going to encourage additional branches or the most branches possible. What you don't want to happen is you don't want let me see if I can give you an example. What you don't want to happen is you don't want, let's say, this particular activation that is here. You can see a little bit of green there. So you don't want this activation that's here, you don't want it to stop. And a lot of times that's what will happen if the Fiddle Leaf Fig doesn't have enough food to push out that additional green growth. So give your Fiddle Leaf Fig that double dose of fertilizer so you can make sure that you get the most amount of branches possible. So there you have it. I think my Fiddle Leaf Fig actually had a lot of progress between week 3 and week 4. And it is finally starting to give that look that I am really hoping that my Fiddle Leaf Fig is ultimately going to take. This is really good, really exciting. I'm looking forward to see what week 5 has to bring. Do you have any other tips or tricks for Fiddle Leaf Figs and how you get yours to branch? If so, leave them in the comment section. If you have any questions about how to give your Fiddle Leaf Fig the ultimate branching, also leave that in the comment section and I'll be sure to answer it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. I'll see you on the next video. What's up everyone, we're back at it again. My name is Brad and welcome back to my channel. Today what I want to do is I want to do something that I have been talking about for a while now, and that is rolling up all of my big chop videos into one main video. So in this video, I'm going to essentially give you an update on all of the big chops that I've done and where they stand at week 5. So this includes things like my Ficus lyrata or my Fiddle Leaf Fig, my Ficus elastica burgundy, my Ficus elastica taniki, my Ficus robusta, my Ficus yellow gem, all of those plants, plus I have a new fun addition that I've just added to the collection that I would love to show you. So without further ado, let me take you outside and show you what my week 5 progress looks like post big chop for all of these beautiful, wonderful plants. So here is my week 5 update of my Fiddle Leaf Fig. As I said before, I'm actually going to combine all of my updates into one update. So I'm going to show you what all of my ficuses look like after giving it the big chop. So here's the Fiddle Leaf Fig that I always start off with. And as you can see, it's put on a substantial amount of growth. I mean, I have leaves that are just coming out of everywhere, and I have more leaves that are forming. So you can see that this sheath is getting nice and swollen, so I can expect some leaves to form there. You can see that I have a new leaf that just popped up, so that's going to get nice and beautiful, as well as this sheath that is semi-swollen, so that's probably going to be another week and a half before that shows. Then as I continue to look, as you can see, another leaf has formed, and these leaves are pretty new, and you can tell that they're pretty new because of the fact that they're fairly soft. They're not stiff yet, and also they're this lighter green color as opposed to this darker green color that we're used to. And then if we come over on this side, again, we see that we have a new leaf that has formed, that just came out of its sheath. 2 new leaves. So getting a ton of growth. A lot of this can be attributed to 2 things. One is the fact that I gave this a double dose of fertilizer before the big chop, as well as I've continued to do a double dose of fertilizer after the big chop. I'll link the fertilizer that I'm using down in the description so you can also use it as well. Now, we can also attribute all of this growth to the fact that this is getting bright, direct sunlight, truly bright, direct sunlight. So it's not indirect, it's bright, direct. It's outside, it's about 8 hours of sunlight per day. As you can see, the sun is just beating on it right now, beating. So it is still holding up really well, which is excellent. This is what we want to see. And then, yeah, just overall, this Fiddle Leaf Fig is performing beautifully. And let me just check the soil real quick to make sure that it's still wet. Still wet. Now, week 5, that's when I'm going to back off of the double dose of fertilizer. So when I do water, I'm just going to give it the regular dose that I do typically give it. And then I also just want to, sorry to bounce around here, I also want to quickly point out that I do have another branch that's forming on this stem as well. So that is excellent. Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2. This Fiddle Leaf Fig has bigger leaves than the other Fiddle Leaf Fig, which is to be expected just because this Fiddle Leaf Fig has less branching, so a lot more energy can be diverted to the leaf production, which is why the leaves are just so much bigger now. But the other Fiddle Leaf Fig, which is right over here, will catch up. So back to this Fiddle Leaf Fig, as you can see, I have so many more leaves now. So many more leaves. And the leaf sizes are also getting pretty big as well. So here's my hand for reference. So we still have some growing to do before it gets to be larger than my hand, but it will get there. But this is the kind of development that we do want to see. And then as we go lower on the branch, we see that we have a branch here. We also have a branch further down. And then going back up and swinging around, we have a branch here as well. So all in all, the Fiddle Leaf Fig, both Fiddle Leaf Figs are doing absolutely amazing. Fiddle Leaf Fig, Ficus lyrata, one of my favorites because of this dark green foliage. So I can't wait to see what the next week brings in this particular growth. Now here is my Ficus altissima yellow gem. Now you will notice that there are no leaves on this particular tree, and that is because I did a big chop. And that was actually the video where I decided to just go ahead and just wrap up all of my weekly updates into one video. So while this is technically week 1 post big chop, we're gonna still call this the week 5 update. Now for the yellow gem, you'll see that I'm starting to have some activations, which is what we want to see. We want to see these activations, and the reason why we want to see these activations is because that tells us that we are potentially going to have branching that is going to occur. So because I recently chopped this is fairly behind in the sense that I am still going to continue to give it a double dose of fertilizer. I'm going to use the same fertilizer for all of my ficus trees. So it's going to be the same 3:1:2 NPK ratio fertilizer that I'm going to link in the description for you as well if you choose to use it. But yes, this Ficus altissima is pretty large right now, height-wise, and I'm hoping that it's just going to flush out with a beautiful array of colors here in the next few weeks. So I'll update you next week on what the Ficus altissima yellow gem looks like as well. If you like videos like this and want to continue to see more videos about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Here is my Ficus Audrey. The Ficus Audrey is also putting on some great colors, some great length, and some great leaves. So I mentioned this before, but I have this loosely staked because I'm trying to keep it more vertical. And as you can see, it just continues just to push growth out of the apical buds. So this leaf here is actually going to get quite large. It's going to get probably larger than this leaf back here. My hand for reference. Hand for reference. Now, one of the things that encourages these big leaves to form like this is something similar, where you want to make sure that you give it that bright light, as well as you want to make sure that you fertilize. That's how you can continue to push out growth. And like I said before, the Ficus altissima, the Ficus Audrey, it readily branches without you having to top it off or without you even having to notch. So this has not been notched and it hasn't been topped, but as you can see, I still have all of these branches forming. Ficus Audrey is doing quite well. It's probably about the same height as my Fiddle Leaf Fig right here. So we'll see which one grows the quickest. But yes, my Ficus Audrey is looking nice. And here is my second Ficus Audrey back here. Now this Ficus Audrey, the reason why it's shorter than my other one is because I kept it in a constrained pot. I actually posted a video about it, about why you should make sure that you upsize your pot and why plants don't like to be root bound, especially if you're trying to get that large, beautiful growth. So this Ficus Audrey is behind, but I'm hoping that within the next month or so, it will slowly but surely catch up to the other one. Now my Ficus Burgundy has actually put on a lot more growth since the last update that I provided. It has just put on so many new leaves. I mean, just look at the branching. It's absolutely incredible and absolutely beautiful. So I will expect these leaves to get big. I mean, these leaves are going to get bigger than the Ficus Audreys that I showed. So my hand for reference, I can expect the leaves to get larger than my hand for this particular Ficus elastica Burgundy. And if you notice, with all of this branching, the reason why this branching is happening is because, again, I'm giving this plant bright, direct sunlight, and I also gave it a double dose of fertilizer before I gave it the big chop, and I have been continuing to give it a double dose of fertilizer for every watering after. But now that it's put on all of these branchings, I can start to lay off a little bit because I know that the growth is going to continue to push out. What I didn't want to happen was I didn't want a bud to appear similar to the bud right above my thumb here. I didn't want a bud like that to appear and not push out growth. And that can typically happen if you don't fertilize your tree. So because I fertilize, I'm expecting this growth to continue to push out. But right now it looks absolutely beautiful, looks absolutely stunning. And I can't wait what the next few months are going to bring as far as the leaf size as well as the height that I'm going to get from this tree. Here is my Ficus robusta. Now, this is similar to the Ficus Audrey in that it readily branches. You do not necessarily need to top off your tree in order to get the branching. The only reason why I topped off this tree was because I was trying to do an experiment and I was doing something unrelated. But even if I didn't top this off, I still would have gotten all of these branchings. So again, I mentioned this before, the reason why I love trees that readily branch is because you'll have these leaves that are in all stages of unfurling. So for instance, I have this leaf that recently unfurled. Right now, this sheath is starting to form. And there is a new leaf underneath here, right here, underneath the sheath. But then if I look right here, you'll notice a later stage where the sheath has become this nice, beautiful red color, and the leaf is about to burst from here. But then if I go over here, you'll see that I have a sheath that has already begun to burst, and the leaf just can't wait to get out. So this is just one of the beautiful things about having a tree that readily branches. Just like my other ficuses, I'm giving this bright, direct sunlight as well as a double dose of fertilizer. The double dose of fertilizer isn't usually necessary for a tree like this because of the fact that it readily branches. So this is also a fast grower as well. Out of all the ficuses, I would have to say that this is probably the fastest one that I have as far as growing. Here is my Ficus elastica taniki. Now, before I mentioned that this Ficus elastica taniki actually was growing a bit faster than the Ficus elastica burgundy, but it seems like the burgundy is actually caught up. And I'm judging that just based on this leaf size here. The leaf size so far is smaller than the burgundy, but again, I will imagine, or I do know, that this is going to get just as big as the Audrey as well as the robusta. So it's going to be roughly the size of my hand when it is all said and done, which I am so excited for. Again, I give this, or I have been giving this, a double dose of fertilizer whenever needed. I've been watering as needed. Right now it doesn't need any water, so that's good. But this is just a beautiful tree, and I just love the Ficus variety of family, and I just love the Ficus family of trees because of the fact that they just come in all different shapes, sizes, and varieties. So here's my Ficus elastica taniki, looking absolutely beautiful in the week 5 update. And finally, I want to show you my newest collection to the Ficus family. So this is my Ficus Moonshine. So I first saw this on Instagram and it just blew my mind with how beautiful the foliage is. I'm probably going to do a overview of this once I get my hands on how to take care of it. I imagine that it's going to be very similar to my other Ficus elasticas, but I have heard that there are some challenges with this particular variety. I'm not sure that those challenges are actually true, or if those challenges are actually valid. So I'm gonna just wait for a little bit, take care of it, see what happens, what it likes, what it doesn't like, and then once I get a handle on it, I'm gonna do a review. I'm gonna let you know how I take care of this Ficus Moonshine. One thing I want to note is the reason why I'm keeping this outside is not just because of the growth that I want it to get, but also because I want this stem to thicken. Remember, the only way your stem or your trunk is going to thicken is if you have movement. So if this is outside, it's going to get that movement, and that movement of the stem or the trunk is what's going to thicken it up. So I'm really excited for this Ficus Moonshine. I hope that I get some pretty good growth this year, and once I, like I said, take care of this for a little bit, I'm gonna let you know some tips and tricks for how to take care of this particular plant. So there you have it. That is what my Ficus plants look like post Big Chop. Like I've said in the previous videos, I hope that this gives you the courage to give your plant the Big Chop if that is something that you want to do or something that you have been afraid to do. Giving your plant the Big Chop will essentially encourage more branching as well as promote vigorous growth throughout the growing season. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. What's up everyone, we're back at it again. My name is Brad and welcome back to my channel. Today what I want to do is I want to give you a week 6 update on what all of my ficuses look like post-chop. So without further ado, let's get to it. Another beautiful and sunny day to do a week 6 update of all of my ficuses. So first, let's start off with the Ficus Burgundy. The Ficus Burgundy is looking absolutely beautiful this week. The leaves are becoming nice and big, and as you can see, they're getting to the ideal size of a bit bigger than my hand. All of my branches are also active, which I absolutely love. I'm going to attribute to all of my branches remaining active to the immense amount of sun that it's getting, that bright direct sunlight, as well as the frequency in which I'm watering. So I'm watering roughly once a week, and also every time I'm watering, I'm also giving it that double dose of fertilizer. That is how I'm maximizing the number of branches and continuing to sustain the branch growth. So my Ficus Burgundy looks absolutely beautiful, and I cannot wait to see what it looks like week 7. Here is my Ficus elastica robusta, and this too is one of my favorite ficuses, just like all of my other ficuses, because of the fact that it readily branches. So the branching pattern here is doing absolutely wonderful, in that all of these branches that you see here, they could have happened without me deciding to top it off, but I did it anyway. And just look at how big these leaves are getting. I mean, take this leaf right here. It's getting absolutely huge, and it hasn't even fully hardened off yet. So that is great to see. Now, I said this before, but one of the reasons why I love when these trees have the beautiful branching pattern is because you'll find leaves that are in different stages of unfurling. So for instance, take this leaf here that has started to shed off its sheath. And then we have this other leaf here that is about to burst out of its sheath. Another one here. I mean, this Ficus elastica robusta is doing great, and it also grows fast and vigorously. Just like with the robusta, it's getting that bright direct sunlight and also being fed a double dose of fertilizer with every watering. My Ficus elastica taniki is also doing pretty well. I'm a bit disappointed with some of the leaf damage that's happened here, and I'm going to say that this is probably because of the fact that there was a little bit of help in trying to get this leaf to come out of its sheath, and that damage, as you can see, just persisted. So we're going to be careful of not doing that in the future, and we're also going to continue to monitor just the overall health, but just appreciate how great this Ficus elastica taniki is starting to look. I mean, the branching pattern is great in that we have multiple branches that are actively pushing out growth. Now, this, similar to the robusta and similar to the burgundy, is also getting that bright direct sunlight, being fed every watering, and the growth is just continuing to really show off. I'm a fan. I am a fan. Moving to this side, we have the Ficus Audreys. So Ficus Audrey 1, Ficus Audrey 2. Ficus Audrey 2 is one of those ficuses that I decided to repot because it was very root bound, and I wanted to, at the time, show off the fact that a root bound plant is not a happy plant. So I gave it a new pot, and since giving it a new pot, it's starting to put on some growth right there. That is a new leaf that has popped since giving it a repot. Over here with my Ficus Audrey number 1, it is just doing absolutely well. The leaves are continuing just to grow. And just like my Ficus robusta back there, this also readily branches. So you can see I have the apical growth that has maintained. So no pinching, nothing like that. I did not have to notch, and I still have all of these branches that have just started to pop off on the Ficus Audrey. So this is a great tree. Again, bright direct sunlight, being fed twice the amount of fertilizer every single watering, and look how great it's looking. The leaves are that nice dark green color, no yellowing, no burning. It just loves being outside. If you want to see more videos like this about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and it would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now back to the week 6 update. Now we have the Fiddle Leaf Figs. Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2, Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1. The Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1 looking great. The leaves are starting to become nice and large. These leaves are still a bit immature because they're very flimsy, and they're also this in between of a lime green and a dark green color, which is when you know that they've reached full maturity. So these leaves probably have a little bit more growing to do. And these reddish brown spots here, I'm not worried about. This is edema, and when you keep your tree outside and exposing it to the elements and just having it rain when it wants to rain, you really can't necessarily control for that because that's caused by uneven watering. The elements are getting to the Fiddle Leaf Fig. It happens, but as the leaf matures, these spots are essentially, or they're going to become virtually invisible. So Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1 is looking great with all of the branching patterns. Let's see, it doesn't look like we have any new leaves that are about to pop, but that's okay because I am sure that they are in development. Now when we go over to Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2, again, this is a little bit taller than Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1 back there, but you can see that I do have swelling of the buds. So swelling of the bud on this particular branch and swelling on the bud on this branch here, which has actually led to a new leaf. There's probably about 2 leaves under there actually. And there's probably about 2 leaves underneath here as well. Then going further down, we have this branch, which has also swollen up. I'm yet to figure out, I don't know if I should keep this or not. What do you guys think? Should I keep this branch, or should I just keep with the more traditional tree-like form of the Fiddle Leaf Fig and remove this branch down here? Because I also have 2 branches, as you can see, have a leaf forming. Leaf forming here. So yeah, should I get rid of this branch or should I keep it? And then up here we also have some branches that haven't really pushed out any growth. I'm hoping that as the season goes, these will become active and begin to push out growth for me. But Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2 looks great. Ficus Moonshine. I've had it for about a week, and like I said, once I get used to how to care for it, I'm going to make a care video of how to care for the Ficus Moonshine. I do see a leaf that is potentially trying to erupt from the sheath, and once I get 1 or 2 more leaves, that's when I'll know that I have my handle on this, or have a handle on this, and I'll make a video. But Ficus Moonshine, I've had it for a week, and it is doing just fine. I really love this marble-like appearance of the Ficus Moonshine. It kind of reminds me of Ficus Taniki, but with more of a green, light green type look to it. So I'm curious to see whether or not when giving it a lot of sun, it's gonna keep with this pink color, kind of similar to a Ficus Taniki Ruby, or if it's gonna be kind of like these more mature, by mature I mean older, leaves at the bottom that have lost that pinkish tint. So anyway, Ficus Moonshine, I love this. It's really going to be cool, especially as the leaves get bigger and we start seeing the more painting on the surface of the leaves. Last but not least, the Ficus Altissima Yellow Gem. Now I will say this one has probably impressed me the most because it hasn't been that long since I've topped it off when I gave it the big chop, but already just look at the amount of growth that it's put on. I mean, all of these buds are active right now, and I'm expecting to have active growth on each bud. Let me switch over here. And by active growth, I mean everything is just going to continue to push out new growth. Nothing is going to stop, and it is going to look absolutely beautiful. So about a week ago, when I first did this, these buds down here, or up here, were about this size. But again, just look at how much growth it's put. Now, I'm hoping that within the next few weeks, I am just gonna get a beautiful flush of leaves, because I would love for you to see what the yellow gem leaves look like when given that bright sunlight, because the variegation pattern on it is like nothing that I can try to describe other than to say that it is a beautiful mixture of the deepest of greens and the lightest of yellows mixed all into one leaf. So I'm excited for this one. So this is my Ficus altissima yellow gem. So that's the week 6 update of what my ficuses look like post big chop. All in all, I'll say I'm pretty happy with what things look like 6 weeks after. I didn't expect this amount of branching, but I did expect a lot of branching. I'm really happy with the vigorous growth that all of my trees have put on, and I hope that it continues to progress as the season continues to go. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. With that, my name is Brad, and I'll see you next week when I give you the week 7 update of what all of my ficuses look like post big chop. Thank you again for watching. What's up, everyone? We're back at it again. My name is Brad, and welcome back to my channel. Today is the day when I'm going to give you the week 7 update on what all of my ficuses look like since being placed outside. Some of them I have given them the big chop, and others I've just placed outside to see the vigorous growth. So without further ado, let's get to it. It's been cloudy for a couple of days, but for the week 7 update, we have another beautiful sunny day. So let's start the week 7 update with the beautiful Ficus elastica burgundy. The Ficus elastica burgundy is, again, just putting on a lot of growth. I love that bushy vertical top that it has, and I also like how thick this stem is getting here as well. Now, I am most likely going to just keep this loosely staked because I want to try my best to keep this stem nice and vertical, as opposed to having that slight lean that it used to have. So again, when we look at these leaves, we'll see that the leaves have definitely become larger in size, and they're also becoming more mature more quickly as well. So with all of the branching that we currently have with this particular Ficus burgundy, I'm starting to get the branches in different growing stages, which I really enjoy. I haven't yet rotated this, and I'm probably going to wait later on this month before I rotate, because I want my stem again to maintain this vertical growth. And because the sun is more intense on this side, I want to keep the sun intensity the opposite side of my lean. So if my Ficus burgundy is leaning to the right, I want to make sure that the sun intensity is highest on the left. Alternatively, let's say my Ficus burgundy was leaning to the left, I would want to make sure that the intensity was most bright on the right, or you would just rotate it to where the sun intensity is greatest, the opposite of the lean. So anyway, Ficus burgundy is looking great. Look at those leaves. I watered a couple of days ago, and I needed to water because although it had been pretty cloudy, the soil was dry. I typically like to film myself watering these plants, but if your plant is thirsty, your plant is thirsty. So like I said, I just went ahead and watered it. And you can see that the soil is still on the moist side. See how dark that is? That's damp, although the surface is a little dry. So all in all, it's looking good. Ficus elastica burgundy. Here is my Ficus elastica robusta. Again, similar to the Ficus elastica burgundy, the leaves are getting a really, really good size. Now, the difference between the burgundy and the robusta, you can really see the differences in the leaf color here. The burgundy truly has like this burgundy black type color to it, with the hint of green as an undertone, whereas the robusta is more green forward. So with this robusta, as you can see, again, all of these branches are in different stages, And you can also see that it has put on an additional amount of growth since last week's update. I can't wait to show you what one of my other plants looks like with the week 7 update, because it has put on so much more growth that you're going to be blown away. So anyway, with this Robusta here, let's see here if there's anything to note besides just the amount of growth. Well, let's take a look down here. So I'm really excited about this branch that's forming here because I need to have more apical growth. It's great that my Robusta is branching outward and still growing outward, but I also wanted to get taller as well. So with this branch here, this is probably going to be my new leading apical branch that's going to go vertical. So that's exciting to see. It's also exciting to see these leaves that are in different stages of unfurling. You can see that these leaves are also nice and firm. They're not really flimsy, and that's because, again, I watered this not too long ago, and there's really no droopiness in the leaves. So my Ficus elastica robusta, yet again, a stunner, showstopper. I love it. It's looking good. Can't wait to see what next week looks like. If you like videos like this and want to continue to see more videos about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now back to the week 7 update. Now with my Ficus elastica taniki, it started off really strong as far as the amount of growth that it put on, but it has since slowed down quite a bit relative to the Ficus elastica burgundy right back there. So the taniki, it is having these beautiful painted leaves, but when the leaves become larger, that's when you can truly see and appreciate the variegation that it puts on. So the leaves are still, I'm going to call it on the small side, not even medium, the small side. And because they're on such a small, because they're on the small side, they really aren't showing off what it's going to look like here maybe in another month or so. So if you take this leaf down here, for instance, I mean, this is an example of the variegation that we will expect to see when the leaves become bigger, as opposed to if you take this leaf right here, you can see that the variegation isn't really quite as strong. But regardless, my Ficus elastica taniki is still a beautiful plant, and I think it's going to put on a lot of growth still yet to come. I'm hoping that the leaves do become quite large, and I know they will become as large as the Robusta here, but it's just a matter of time. So Ficus elastica taniki, beautiful plant to add to your collection. Week 7 update looks good. Soil is still damp, so I'm not going to water, but I'll keep you updated on what the progress looks like there as well. So here are my Ficus Audreys. So we have Ficus Audrey 1. I think I call this Ficus Audrey 1. And then we have Ficus Audrey 2. Ficus Audrey 2, again, in a new pot, a bigger pot. And since being in that bigger pot, it is really trying to put on some growth, which is amazing. I did rotate this recently because, again, I want the sun to be on the opposite side of the lean. And since it is leaning to the right, I need the sun intensity to be most on the left. And it is doing pretty well. I need for the branches to start forming along this stem here where it's bare. I could, for instance, decide to notch, but because these Ficus Audreys readily branch, I really don't need to do that here. You can actually see branch formation occurring without me having to do much of anything. So we actually have leaf showing right there. And then when we come over to the Ficus Audrey 2, which is just absolutely looking monstrous right now. Right now it's about 5 feet in a pot. Actually more like 5.5 feet in the pot. I'm hoping that by the end of this growing season, it's going to be 6 feet plus. That would be amazing. And also I'm hoping by the end of this growing season, the branching that it's starting to put on, so for instance, there's a branch that's coming towards me, I'm hoping that it continues to extend out, because it's great when you have that bushy growth up top, but if you really want character for your trees, I recommend that you let the horizontal growths really extend out. And if you have a nice sturdy trunk, you don't have to worry about any kind of lean that is associated with the branches sticking out. Because I keep this outside, the wind is doing its work on it. And because the wind is doing its work on it, the trunk is getting nice and sturdy by itself. And you can actually see, let me point this out here. So do you see how this stem is like a green color? And then if we come down here, how it's more of this tannish white color. Well, it's because this is new growth. This is new growth since this season, and it hasn't quite hardened off from the wind yet. The wind will work wonders on this, and the wind will, in fact, eventually turn this green into that tan color. And when it becomes tan, that's how you know it's really like stiffening up. So Ficus Audrey, beautiful. This Ficus Audrey is coming along. It too will be beautiful, but it's looking good. Here are the plants that started it all, the Fiddle Leaf Figs. So here's my Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1 and Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2. Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1, it hasn't put on that much growth since the previous week's update, so since the week 6 update, but I do think that I'm going to get some new leaves coming in about 2 weeks or so, because I do see a little bit of swelling right here. Now, unfortunately, this branch that I was hoping was going to form right here above my thumb hasn't really pushed out any new growth. So that's a bit sad because I really wanted to have some growth coming out here towards me. But these leaves are still looking good, and I think it's still going to have a very, very beautiful shape. I haven't rotated it since, I believe, week 3. So we're good with this one. Now, when it comes to this Fiddle Leaf Fig, this Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2, it has put on some new growth. So I had some swelling on these buds up here. So these are 3 new leaves. So 1, 2, 3. And we also have new leaves here. 1, 2, 3. And then we additionally have 2 new leaves here. And again, this has all happened in a week. 2 new leaves here, 1, 2, and 2 new leaves here, 1, 2. Now, a lot of that has to do with just the fact that I have continued to feed my Fiddle Leaf Figs, and it also has to do with the fact that it's getting that bright sunlight. I do want to quickly call your attention to this white mildewy substance here. We can take care of that, no problem. I'm just gonna take a soapy solution and just wipe that off. I'm not gonna use anything like neem oil on it because of the fact that it's outside. And when it's outside with that intense sunlight, the foliage will be really photosensitive, and that's gonna cause these leaves to burn. So I'm not gonna use neem oil. Instead, I'm just gonna use soap water, wipe it off, and it should be good to go. So here's the ficus that I was really excited to show you. And this is the Ficus altissima yellow gem. It has put on so much growth in the matter of a week. And last week in the week 6 update, I really said that I can't wait for you to see how these leaves look when they become larger, because it really shows off just the wonderful variegation that these plants have. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about here, where the leaf is outlined by this lime green color, but then inside it's filled in with the mixture of dark green as well as a medium green color tone. And all of the leaves are like that. When you give these bright sunlight, you can expect this variegation pattern. If you keep your plant indoors and it's not getting that bright sunlight, what's going to happen is your leaf is pretty much going to essentially be this dark green color, and you're going to have a medium tone green color around the edge. So you're really not going to be able to appreciate and enjoy the colorful array of colors that this altissima produces. So I have so many branches that are also happening with this yellow gem, which is just remarkable. So for instance, on this one branch, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 branches off of this branch. I have another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 branches off of this branch. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then on the opposite side, there are some growth points that haven't yet activated on this branch here as well. And then along the trunk, I also have some activations. This is a testament to what topping your trees off can really do, especially if you give them a lot of sun and especially if you give them fertilizer. They want to live, they want to survive, they are extremely resilient in the right conditions, and even in the wrong conditions, they can easily be brought back to life if then given the right conditions. But these plants, they want to give you growth. I recommend this plant if you find a fiddle leaf fig to be a little bit challenging, because the Altissima is a little bit less demanding. Now, obviously, like I said, you might not get the beautiful variegation that I mentioned earlier if you can't give it that bright direct sunlight, but you will still get growth. So my Ficus Altissima Yellow Gem. Here is my Ficus Moonshine that has put on a leaf, and it doesn't look like I have any swelling here. So I'm probably gonna be about 2 or 3 weeks out before I get any additional growth. I will say I do think that the stem is getting a bit sturdier, which is great. So the Moonshine is beautiful ficus. Now, I know I said before that I wanted to keep an eye on this particular leaf here. So this was a leaf that I think was pretty new when I first got the plant. And I wanted to know whether or not, with the amount of sunlight that I was going to give it, if this color, this undertone, it's a pinkish undertone, would eventually go away and become more of this whitish greenish undertone, or if it would maintain. So far it looks like it's maintaining, but I'm going to give it a couple of more weeks and see if this maintains or if it goes back to this whitish green color. I'm curious to see whether or not this pink undertone is a product of sun, or if it's just a matter of that's what the newer leaves look like. So here is my Ficus Moonshine. So there you have it. That's the week 7 update about what all of my ficuses look like since bringing them outside. Some of them have just put on a tremendous amount of growth, like my Ficus Altissima Yellow Gem, and others are a little bit slower, like my Ficus Elastica Taniki. I do think by the end of this growing season, I'm going to get a lot of tremendous, vigorous growth, and I'm hoping that I'm at least going to get 1.5 feet to about 2 feet of growth by the end of it. Thank you again for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. I'll see you next week with week 8 update on what all of my ficuses look like. See you on the next one. What's up, everyone? We're back at it again. My name is Brad, and welcome back to my channel. Today, what I want to do is I want to give you a week 8 update on what all of my ficuses look like since giving them the big chop. I've given you week 1 all the way up to week 7, and now we're at week 8. They've slowed down a little bit, but without further ado, let me take you outside so I can show you what the progress looks like so far. It's been super hot lately, so because of that, I waited for the sun to go down a little bit before I did the week 8 update. So let's start off with this Ficus Elastica Burgundy. As you can see, the leaves have started to get really big, just like last week, and it's put on some more growth, which is amazing. I have this leaf up top that has unfurled, and you can see that it's starting to shed its sheath. It's still attached, but that's great. I have a leaf here that has unfurled or is starting to unfurl as well, and you'll notice that I have swelling here as well as here as well of the leaves. All in all, this specimen is looking absolutely beautiful. I do think that by the end of the growing season, I'm going to put on potentially upwards of 1 foot to 1.5 feet of additional growth. I think these branches are going to continue to develop. I also think I'm going to get more apical growth, so I'm going to get more height on my Ficus Elastica Burgundy, and it's just going to be, all in all, a really great specimen of a tree. I mentioned this before, but because of the fact that we haven't had any rain in a while, it's been a little north of 2 weeks, I've had to water my Tanikis and my Elasticas and my Fiddle Leaf Figs just more frequently. So I have watered this as of yesterday. I'm gonna hold off on the water today. When I did water, I did give it a double dose of fertilizer, and I've noticed that the growth has slowed down a little bit with this particular plant, and I think it's because it is water stressed. So if it doesn't have the water to help feed itself, because water has components that are pretty essential to these plants and really any plant, it's going to really slow down in that growth. I want to make sure that I maximize all the direct bright sunlight that it's getting, so I'm probably going to up my watering to about once a week to once every week and a half. Plant number 2, you have to love it. This is the Ficus elastica robusta, and again, just like my Ficus elastica burgundy, the growth is looking really good. Now, one thing that I really want to try to do this particular growing season, and what I hope happens, is I want to continue to get more upward growth. I think I'm going to get that upward growth from some of these branches that are buried deep in here. But once it really shoots up past this canopy here, it should just begin to take off. And as you can see, the leaf production here has also slowed down. And again, I think it's because this plant is also water stressed. You'll notice that the leaves are really curling a bit upward. Now, you'll get this leaf curl upward when your leaves are doing their best to conserve moisture. When your leaves curl upward like this, it essentially is decreasing the surface area in which water can evaporate or transpire from the leaves. Conversely, if you have too much water in your pot, for instance, you might notice that your leaves are a little bit more flimsy and floppy and are actually in an inverted U shape or an N shape. And that's because your leaves are trying to increase the surface area so they can increase that transpiration of water from the leaves. But because these leaves are curled upward, I did water this plant yesterday, and it has recovered a little bit, and I'm hoping that it's going to continue to recover so we can get past this stress that it's experiencing right now, so we can continue to get that, growth, apical growth that we want to see, similar to the Ficus elastica burgundy over there. If you like videos like this and want to continue to see more videos about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to the week 8 update. Plant number 3 is the Ficus elastica taniki, which is next to my Ficus elastica robusta, which is right in front of my Ficus elastica burgundy. Now, finally, I'm starting to get bigger leaves on the taniki, and you can see that the leaf production is starting to produce leaves that are quite pretty, actually. Now, just like with my other plants, I have started to water more frequently because we are in a period of drought, and I want to make sure that these plants remain as happy as possible and continue to produce as much as possible. If it doesn't have water, or if your plants don't have water, chances are you're going to notice a slowdown in any kind of growth that they might experience. So with this Ficus elastica taniki, I'm upping the watering, similar to my other plants, to about once a week to a week and a half, and that seems to be doing the trick so far. I'm hoping that we're going to get some rain soon, because these plants love to have the wetness of the rain hit the leaves. But all in all, I'm really happy with what this Ficus elastica taniki looks like so far, and you can really see the contrast too, just the contrast in the leaves. So beautiful plant, one of my favorites, my Ficus elastica taniki. Here are my Ficus Audreys. So Ficus Audrey number 1 and Ficus Audrey number 2. Now the Ficus Audrey number 1, really nothing has changed that much. It still has a beautiful tree-like structure, and the trunk is starting to get thicker, as I would expect, because it's outside and it's getting movement in that trunk. You'll also notice too that as we progress through the weeks, the darkening of the trunk has happened as well. So this green is actually starting to essentially get hardened off. So if you look here, you'll see the process happening, and this is an essential component to make sure that you have a nice sturdy structure for your tree. If you have this, it's great. If you don't, that's fine. Just do your best to give your trunk some movement. That way it can sturdy itself up and prevent any kind of weakness in your tree as it begins to fill up top. The last thing you want to happen is have beautiful branching up top that can't be supported without any kind of additional support. the best trees are trees that can support themselves and support that upward growth that they put on. So the Ficus audrey number 1 looks beautiful. Moving over to my Ficus audrey number 2, you can see that the leaves continue to form on this particular branch that is to the left of the main stem, which is great, and we'll keep that. You'll also notice too that, I've staked this loosely because what I want to do is I want to do my best to give this tree as much of a vertical appearance as possible. One of the main issues that you'll see with these trees, or really any tree, is that if you allow them to begin leaning and you don't catch the lean early enough, your tree is going to have this U-like structure. Or I should actually say C-like structure. But as you can see, I still have some green up here, which means that the trunk really hasn't yet settled on the shape that it wants to be. So I'm hoping that by loosely staking, and you can see that it's loosely staked because it does move just by tugging on the leaves. I'm hoping by loosely staking it, I'm going to be able to correct the growth pattern. But again, I'm really happy with the type of growth that it's put on, and I'm hoping that lower down on this stem, without doing any kind of notching, that the tree is going to begin to fill out. I'm actually going to make a video about how to notch. I don't know if it's going to come before or after this video, but I'm going to make a video about how to notch these type of trees, or really any kind of ficuses, so you can get that growth if you have a bare stem. So Ficus audrey number 2, Ficus audrey number 1. Moving along to my Fiddle Leaf Figs, we have Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1, and we also have Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2. Really nothing much has changed with these Fiddle Leaf Figs other than the fact that I do have a leaf that is starting to form here. You'll see that I have some swelling. Now, if you look at these leaves, you'll notice that these leaves are a bit on the yellowish side, which really isn't something that we want. We want the leaves to become or be dark green. So I am going to monitor this, because if this type of growth happens, or if this discoloration continues to happen, what I need to do is most likely need to supplement with some kind of iron or some kind of nitrogen in order to increase the greenery. But these leaves are looking absolutely beautiful, and I'm really happy with what this particular Fiddle Leaf Fig has done since giving it a big chop. And I'm really happy that I do have some leaf formation. I did mention last week that I was probably going to get another leaf within the next week or two, and I do think that's going to happen here shortly. So this is looking absolutely beautiful. And then moving over to my second Fiddle Leaf Fig, really, again, nothing has changed. I don't have any kind of swelling or any kind of new leaves that are forming yet, but I'm hoping that, who knows, perhaps in the next month and a half or so, especially if we get a lot of water, we're going to start to see more growth forming from this Fiddle Leaf Fig. I do believe that when I start upping the water, all of my plants are going to be rewarded, or reward me with a lot of growth. So here are my Fiddle Leaf Figs. Here is my Ficus Moonshine. Now with my Ficus Moonshine, I'm actually watering more frequently than I am with my plants that are in bigger pots, because this pot is so small. Now I'm watering this pretty consistently at once every week to once every 5 days, because I do notice that the soil dries out, or tends to dry out more quickly. I haven't gotten any new leaves besides the previous leaf that I had, I think around maybe week 6 or week 5. But I am noticing that I'm having some length on this sheath right here. So perhaps within the next 2 weeks, I can expect to see a new leaf emerge. So that's super exciting. Ficus elastica, excuse me, not my Ficus Moonshine. Absolutely beautiful plant. And here is the Ficus altissima yellow gem, which has done just absolutely incredibly. Now, if you look, I have so many branching patterns going on, and all of this since doing a chop on it. And I mean, this is what I'm talking about. If you give your plants a big chop, they will reward you. Just as long as you have the patience, and as long as you do or take the right steps, you will get this branching easily. Now, I did mention before that I couldn't wait for the leaves to start to become bigger, because these leaves will get bigger. These leaves will get as big as my Ficus robusta right there. But, it does take some time after giving it some kind of chop. But just look at the at the growth pattern that these leaves are exhibiting. It's unbelievable. Just the lime, I'll call this lime greens and yellows and dark greens and forest greens. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Now, I do want to also point out here that just because you chop off a branch at a node, or just because you chop a branch off, doesn't mean that this particular branch or node is going to become dormant. Your tree will push out additional growth. So I did have a branch that used to exist right here. I cut that branch and look, I'm getting new growth pushed out. Now, the reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to have a nice, uniform, clean look when I gave my Ficus altissima yellow gem the big chop. And I really wanted to show that your tree can push out growth even when it doesn't have leaves that will help it out. So Ficus altissima yellow gem, absolutely love it. It's doing spectacular. And I just can't wait to see what all of my plants look like in the upcoming week. Now, I am going to be out of town next week, so most likely I'm not going to have a week 9 update for you, but we'll pick this back up at week 10 so you can just see what the progress looks like, I guess, within a 2-week gap. I will try to have a bonus video for all of you to next week in place of the week 9 update, since I'm not going to be able to do it. So I hope that will hold you over before, or I hope that'll hold you over before I have that week 10 update posted. Awesome. So there you have it. That's the week 8 update on what all of my ficuses look like since giving them the big chop. Again, the progress has slowed down a little bit, but I'm still really impressed with what the Ficus altissima yellow gem has done. I'm hoping that within the next 2 weeks or so, I'm going to get some more growth, as well as I'm hoping by giving my plants some more water, because like I said, we've been kind of in a drought here. I'm hoping that these 2 things will help to increase the growth rate of some of the plants. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next week, or maybe 2 weeks from now, when I give you an update on what all of my ficuses look like since giving them the big chop. I'll see you on the next one. What's up, everyone? We're back at it again. My name is Brad, and welcome back to my channel. Today, what I want to do is I want to give you a week 10 update of what all of my ficuses look like post giving it the big chop. So let's get into it. Week 10 update of giving my ficuses the big chop. Let's start off with some good news. We've finally have gotten some rain. So rain is great because with rain comes humidity, and these trees love humidity. Also, it helps with keeping the soil watered, as opposed to me having to go inside and bring in bottles or even using the watering hose. Week 10, starting off amazing. So with this week 10 update, as I said, we got some rain. So the leaves are a little bit damp, but that's okay because it's rainwater and not water from a tap. With this rain, we also see that we're starting to get some growth again. Now, before, with all of that sun and drought-like conditions, it was really a challenge for these trees to start pushing out growth. They almost went into a state of dormancy, which you see a lot with outdoor plants, especially ones that flower. If it is too hot and they don't have enough moisture, or they're not able to uptake moisture as quickly as they're losing moisture, they go into this state of dormancy in order to conserve water. But because we got that rain and because we have that increased humidity, you see that with my Ficus burgundy, I have some growth on this particular branch. And then swinging around, we also see that I have some additional growth that has really started to push out. So this is my Ficus elastica burgundy. Beautiful, beautiful tree. The trunk is looking nice and healthy. Now, I did check to see whether or not it was okay to remove my loose stake, and it's not. Because if you recall, the reason why I have this staked in the first place is because I'm trying to maintain a very vertical-like trunk. And it was, without the stake, the trunk was actually leaning or curving a little bit over to the right. And as you can see with this loose stake, if I were to basically push the stake over to the right, my branch goes over to the right, or my trunk goes over to the right. And and I want it to be a little bit more vertical. So we'll keep this on here for a couple of more weeks, and hopefully by then we'll have a nice vertical, healthy trunk. Beautiful. Switching over to this side of things, we have the Ficus robusta. So I've said this before, the leaves on these Ficus robusta, they are way more green than the Ficus burgundy. The burgundy has burgundy leaves, the robusta has more green leaves. But the robusta, in my opinion, branches more readily than the elastica. Now with this, similar to the burgundy, it went into, again, a state of dormancy, but now with that rain that came, oh my gosh, I'm happy that that rain came. We have increased humidity that's hitting these leaves. We have some nice rainwater that helped to water this tree, and we noticed that I'm having some growth points on these branches. So for instance, this branch here is pushing out some growth. Let's see, swinging around. Let's see if I can find, oh, here we go. This particular branch as well. And then even if you look at this leaf, you'll see that this leaf is smaller than you would expect. And part of that has to do with that state of dormancy that I was talking about. The trees were trying to conserve water and really weren't focused on pushing out new growth. Instead, what they were focused on was trying not to pretty much die because they didn't have enough moisture to survive. So Ficus elastica robusta, again, looking great. Still hoping to get more vertical growth. I do see I have this outward growth, but vertical growth would be good here. I'm gonna keep these branches, these lower branches for now, just to see what the shape looks like. At the end of the growing season, if I don't like it, I potentially will trim it off, but we'll see. What do you think? Should I keep it as it is, or should I start shaping up the robusta to really get the shape that I'm looking for now? Let me know in the comments section. Now moving back a little bit, we are looking at the Ficus elastica Taniki. So this is the Taniki and not the Ruby. The Taniki doesn't have the very reddish leaves. The Taniki has more of the cream-like color. Now you'll notice that we have some reddish or some pinkish margins on the leaf, and that really is attributed to the fact that this is getting so much sun. Typically, if this is kept indoors, you will just be left with the creamy color. Now, the creamy color will become more prominent as the leaves mature. Now, I am also excited about this Taniki because, if you recall, a couple of weeks ago, I was mentioning how small the leaves were. And you can actually see some of the sizes that I'm talking about. I mean, these leaves were pretty small, but as the branches have matured, the leaves have become larger, which is absolutely excellent because with the larger leaves, you can truly see how this Taniki can really show off the color pattern and variegation that it has. And this is one of the reasons why the Ficus elastica Taniki is one of my favorite plants, just because of that variegated look, that variegated pattern. Now, the burgundy is also gorgeous, and so is the robusta, but the Taniki just has that special characteristic to it that I think a lot of people find unique and interesting. My Ficus audries are also looking really good. I like the height that the Ficus audries put on. This, just like with all of my other ficuses, was experiencing that dormancy where the apical growth pretty much just remained stagnant. You can see here that it is still fairly small here, and I'm hoping that within this next week, I'm hoping that we continue to get some rain and sun, and that this bud will basically swell and produce more apical growth. I know it will. It's just a matter of time. My branches are also looking nice and healthy. As you can see here, I have a branch. Actually, I have several branches, so that's really nice. I like the shape that this Ficus audrey is putting on right now. I don't think I want to do any kind of trimming at all. The canopy is nice and high, and especially when this is inside, it's going to have that nice, full, lush look. If you like videos like this and want to see more videos about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and would mean a lot. Now let's get back to the week 10 update. Swinging over to the second Ficus Audrey, so Ficus Audrey number 2, you can see that I have gotten some growth on this particular tree as well. Now, this leaf hasn't hardened off yet, which is why it's a bit flimsy, but this leaf is also brand new, and it really is putting on a lot of growth. So this branch is to the left, it's really taking off. I mean, the leaf is huge, and I'm hoping that I continue to get more branch development lower in the stem, which I think I will, because I see some buds that are trying to activate, and I do think in a couple of weeks I will see those buds really take off. Now, I'm hoping that they'll take off before we reach the end of the growing season. I think they will, but it's just something to be mindful of when you're growing these trees, that you do have a finite time period within a particular season to really push out growth. If you miss that time period, you basically have to wait until next year to maximize the growth potential of your plants, especially if you put them outdoors. Now, this Ficus Audrey is doing a really good job catching up to Ficus Audrey number 1. Doesn't look as full, but from a height perspective, it's doing a decent job. I also moved the loose stake up a little bit, because while the bottom was giving me that nice vertical growth that I wanted, the top was still giving me a slight lean over to the right, or really not even a lean, but a bend. So I moved the tie up higher on the tree, so it's right here, right above, right below this node. So that's going to help give it that nice vertical growth. Loosely staked, so it still has the ability to move, and it still will move, barely tucking, and it's just giving me all kinds of movement. Again, that movement is important, because the only way to get a nice thick trunk is to give your tree stimulation. If your tree doesn't get stimulation, what you'll end up with is a leggy stem that can't really support the top growth of your plant, and your plant will suffer. So keep that in mind. If your plant is indoors, be sure to shake it. If it's outdoors, let Mother Nature do its thing. You will end up with a nice, hefty trunk. I mean, like, for instance, like, look at the size of this trunk. It's nice and thick. Here are the twin Fiddle Leaf Figs. We have Fiddle Leaf Fig. I think I called this one Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1, and this one Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2. Let's start off with Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1. You can see that on the right-hand side here, I have actually gotten this bud to finally push out some growth, so that's very exciting. It's always exciting when you get new leaves, especially when your plants have been kind of just sitting there for weeks without pushing out new growth despite fertilizing. So this is really exciting. This is probably going to be a 2-leaf set. I don't see any more growth along this stem or this branch, but I'm hoping that it will come. And I'm also waiting for this stem to thicken up. It will, or this branch to thicken up. I know that it will. It's just a matter of patience, because right now it's a bit flimsy, but the wind is working on it, so it's going to be fine. And then if we take a peek down here, we do see that this bud is starting to swell. And then let's see if I see any other kind of swelling. I don't think I see any other swelling on this particular Fiddle Leaf Fig, but again, it's still exciting when it does happen. So 2 leaves are coming there. Now, swinging over to Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2, we can see that the leaves are nice and upright. Part of the reason why it's upright is because it's finally cooled down a little bit since that dry spell, which is good. And it doesn't look like, oh, actually I might have some swelling right here. Let me take a look at this sheath. Nope, no swelling right here yet, but it will come. It's just all about patience. No swelling down here. Yep, no swelling down there. So Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2, right now I think it's just focused on trying to recover from the drought, but it's still looking beautiful. It has a nice shape to it. a nice trunk to it. It's looking good. Both of the Fiddle Leaf Figs are. Moving down to my Ficus Moonshine. Ficus Moonshine has definitely put on some additional growth since the last week's update, but the growth that it's put on is all happening underneath this sheath right here. This will be the second new leaf since I took ownership of this particular Ficus Moonshine, but it's looking good. I'm hoping by the end of this growing season it's going to be, I don't know, it's about 8 inches now. I'm hoping that it's going to be, yeah, it's about 8 inches now. I'm hoping that it's going to be about 2 feet by the end of this growing season. The leaves are very beautiful, very unique. And it does look like, I had asked the question before, because when these new leaves unfurl, they have this pinkish undertone. And I was curious if that pinkish undertone was a byproduct of it being out in the sun, and if that pinkish undertone would maintain, or if that undertone would become more of this green cream-like color. And it does seem like that this pink undertone, so this is the new leaf, it does seem like that pink undertone does fade. So I do imagine that this leaf is eventually going to look more like this leaf in color, which I'm absolutely okay with. Either one would have been fine with me, because I just really like the variegated pattern of this. But this moonshine is looking absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. The stem is starting to thicken up and actually become a true bona fide trunk, which is great. And all in all, I'm so happy that I got this plant added to my collection. The Ficus altissima yellow gem is just absolutely loving being outside. It previously was inside, where, you know, due to just doing some home renovations, it struggled a little bit, and I really wanted to give it an extra boost. So in order to give it that extra boost, I basically cut every single branch bare. So this branch had no leaves on it, this branch had no leaves on it, this branch had no leaves on it, and in a couple of weeks, it has just absolutely pushed out growth like no other. This probably has grown the fastest out of any of my ficuses that I have outside right now, and that is even with all of the branching that it has had to basically maintain. I mean, this particular branch has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 branches off of it. This branch has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 branches off of it. This particular branch has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 branches off of it. So it's really had to maintain a lot of growth, and being outside has really helped it a lot. The color pattern is absolutely beautiful. Something that you should consider when you're adding plants to your collection, especially when you are wanting something that looks a bit unique and just isn't plain green. Think about getting some type of variegated, easy to care for plant like these Ficus altissima's yellow gem, or even like the Ficus elastica taniki. I'm really pleased with the amount of growth that my ficuses have done from week 9 to week 10. I think a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that we're starting to get out of this drought, and with the help of the rain, it really has allowed the ficuses to enjoy the extra humidity that this growing season has provided. They were a bit stagnant between week 8 and week 9, and it really was because there just really wasn't enough humidity to make the plants feel comfortable pushing out that growth. So I'm hoping that between week 10 and week 11, we can keep up with having a little bit of rain and a little bit of sun, so we can continue to see how tall these plants can get within one growing season. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Brad, and if you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. I'll see you next week when I give you the week 11 update of what all of my ficuses look like post Give Me Get the Big Chop. What's up everyone, we're back at it again. My name is Brad and welcome back to my channel. Today what I want to do on this hot day is give you a week 10 update on what all of my ficuses look like post giving it the big chop. Without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off the week 10 update with my Ficus elastica burgundy. The Ficus elastica burgundy is looking great, but it's also been looking great for the past few weeks. I removed the stake because the tree was pretty much as vertical as I was really hoping to get it. I do think that the growth is going to continue to pretty much be fairly vertical. And I also think that these leaves, which again are absolutely beautiful in their dark emerald green color, I do think that they're going to continue to get larger. Now, this tree on the week 10 update is still pushing out a good amount of growth. There was a time where the growth started to slow, but I think that was probably due to the amount of heat that we were getting. Now, we're still getting a lot of heat. The highs have been in the high 90s, and even with that type of heat, the leaves still look absolutely beautiful. I did point out this damage here. That's just mechanical damage. And, you know, I'm okay with that because I know that I did that myself. But all in all, the Ficus elastica burgundy is really performing well. Let's see, I have a new leaf that has started to unfurl right here. I have a new leaf that just popped out of its sheath. I have some swelling of the sheath occurring, so I know that that means that here in the next few days, I'm gonna have even more leaves. Now, my goal here really is to make sure that this Ficus elastica burgundy puts on as much vertical growth as possible. So right now it is a little under shoulder height, and I'm hoping that it's gonna put on at least another foot and a half of growth. I think that once the temperatures cool down slightly, and as I continue to give this plant fertilizer, it's gonna just explode with growth. We got a lot of rain yesterday, about an inch, so I don't need to water this, and I'm okay with that. Without watering, that means I can't fertilize, but again, I'm okay with that because I have been fertilizing pretty regularly. So maybe next week, if the potting soil is reasonably dry, I'll go ahead and fertilize my Ficus elastica burgundy. Here is the Ficus elastica robusta. To be quite honest, I've been a bit disappointed with the growth progress of this robusta for the past 2 weeks. Initially, it was just exploding with growth. So I had all of these varying growth points, and you can still see them, but the sheaths really haven't done any kind of swelling and really haven't produced any kind of growth in the past 2 weeks. And again, I'm pretty certain that that is due to heat stress. So when your plants get into this state of having an excessive amount of heat and hot, they do their best to really conserve their energy as much as possible, because not only are they losing moisture through the leaves, but they're also at the same time trying to balance out the moisture loss from the leaves with keeping itself well hydrated. When you reach this state of heat stress, your plant really isn't focusing on pushing out new growth. Instead, what it's doing is it's focusing on survival. And a great way to survive is to conserve as much energy as possible. This is a tricky balancing act because this plant is getting that bright, direct sunlight. And if I want it to grow more quickly, it potentially would if the temperatures weren't so hot. So I'm expecting that within the next maybe month, I'm going to get another big push of growth on this Ficus elastica robusta. But although it's disappointing me anyway with the growth pattern over the past 2 weeks, it still is beautiful, and I still do think that I'm going to get that extra foot, maybe 2 feet of height on this particular plant. Interestingly enough, my Ficus elastica taniki is still pushing out growth despite also having the same heat that my Ficus elastica robusta and my Ficus elastica burgundy are getting. Now, I know I have said this and I've preached this, but this plant will get those big leaves if you just give it time. If you compare my week 10 with my week 1, you'll see that the leaves are extremely small. And with those small leaves, you really couldn't appreciate the variegation that the Taniki would have. So let's see if I can find a smaller leaf. So if we take this leaf that's hidden back here, it's fairly small. But then when you compare it to some of the newer growth that's being pushed out, the newer growth is fairly large. But this is still not the maximum potential that the Taniki will have. These leaves will get just as big as the Robusta here. They're essentially in the exact same family. It's just a different look on your Ficus elasticas. So I still cannot wait for the leaves to get bigger. Now, I also mentioned that I'm getting new growth. So you can see that I have this leaf that's starting to burst out of its sheath. And then we have, oh, well, looks like we had some hungry deer, because I have a leaf that's been eaten here and also a leaf that's been eaten here. Luckily, I shouldn't say luckily, but I'll deal with this because these leaves are far enough down at the base of the stem to where as these stems become larger and basically fill out, these leaves are basically going to drop off anyway because these branches are going to get thicker. So we're okay with that. And, you know, again, have some damage here that we'll deal with. Luckily for me, though, the buds have not been eaten, or I shouldn't say the buds, but the growth points, the apical growth points haven't been eaten. So I am going to continue to get that nice big push of growth. So here is my Ficus elastica Taniki. If you like videos like this and want to continue to see more videos about houseplant tips and tricks, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. It's totally free and would mean a lot. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to the week 10 update. Next up are the twins. That is the Ficus Audrey number 1 and the Ficus Audrey number 2. The Ficus Audrey number 1, it's still doing its thing. It's still pushing out growth. Finally got 2 new leaves. So also looks like I'm having a leaf that's forming underneath here. You notice that swelling, which is a great sign. And these leaves are just one of my favorites because visually looking at them, it's striking how dark green the leaves can get. But more interesting to me is just the velvety feel of these leaves. They kind of remind me of a lamb's ear, the plant, if you've ever grown those. Very, very, very velvety. And then moving over here to number 2, you can see that I have a leaf that just finished popping out. It's gonna get nice and large. It hasn't fully hardened off yet, which is why the green color is a little bit on the lighter shade compared to this darker shade here. And I'm also having some swelling. So that swelling is a great sign that I'm gonna continue to get more growth. And then when I swing over to this branch, you'll see that my branching is also going well as well. I mentioned this before, that my goal is to hopefully have this particular Ficus Audrey catch up with the other Ficus Audrey, and I think that it's doing a fairly decent job. I did have this originally in a smaller pot because I was trying to show that keeping your plant in a smaller pot really isn't ideal. It basically constrains its growth. But since putting it in this newer pot and giving it basically the exact same conditions as my Ficus Audrey number 1, it's just absolutely exploded with growth. I'm hoping that, and I do believe that this will happen, that this stem thickens up by the end of this growing season, because I just like those nice hefty stems and trunks, because it makes your trees actually look like trees. These are the second set of twins, that is the Fiddle Leaf Figs. So Fiddle Leaf Fig, I think this one might be number 2 and this one might be number 1. So let's start off with Fiddle Leaf Fig number 1. So this is the one that I have pretty much been taking a picture of every single day to monitor its growth. And check this out. 2 new leaves. 2 new leaves finally. It's been stuck at a certain state for the past few weeks, and I'm finally getting new growth, which I'm absolutely thrilled with. And I also see some swelling here. You can actually see a green tip, and then you can see another, well, actually you can't see a green tip here, but that's okay. See if I can see any other green tips forming. No other green tips forming, but I do know, oh, look at that, another leaf. I do know that this thing is going to continue to explode. It's going to continue to just grow more vigorously and just continue to reward me with beautiful growth. Fiddle Leaf Figs, a classic. Now swinging over to Fiddle Leaf Fig number 2, it pretty much looks the same, aside from the fact that some of these leaves have hardened off. Now you can tell that these leaves have hardened off because of the fact that they have, or they're remaining nice and large, but they're also remaining nice and upright. Usually what happens is when you have leaves that haven't yet hardened off, you'll have these massive leaves, but they'll be quite flimsy, so they'll essentially flop. And that really isn't a good look, but this one looks very good. So let's see if we see any new growth coming. Check all, nope, nothing in there. See, check some of the stems, nothing in there. Okay, so we have, it doesn't look like we have any new growth forming yet on this Fiddle Leaf Fig, but you know, we'll keep monitoring it, and hopefully as the weather cools down some, we'll get some growth, because really all we're wanting now is we're just wanting that sunlight, but without temperatures in the high 90s, because that's really going to stress these plants out. I will say this though, that even though these plants are outside in very high temperatures and getting stressed, I still would rather have my plants outside getting that bright sunlight than keeping them inside where the sunlight isn't quite as intense, because the trade-off is still weighed towards keeping your plant outside if you want that nice vigorous growth and if you want a nice healthy trunk for your plant. Here is the Ficus Moonshine. Ficus Moonshine has actually done quite well. I mean, it's put on 3 leaves. It's working on its 4th leaf since I've gotten it, and that's probably an average of at least 1 leaf a week, week and a half, which is absolutely amazing. I am still a fan of this color pattern, and it looks like that with the amount of sunlight that the plant gets, it really doesn't, or with the amount of sunlight that I'm giving it right now, it really isn't impacting the variegation pattern. So by that I mean, if you sometimes give your plants too much sunlight, the variegation will go either one way or the other as far as producing solid leaves. For instance, if you give your plant too little light and your plant is a variegation of, let's say, green and pink, you might notice that all of the leaves that your plant is producing are going to be solidly green. Conversely, if you give your plant too much light, so say in the case of maybe like a Philadelphia Brazil, you might notice that your plant leaves will be more of a neon color, or a solid neon color. So I'm really impressed with what this Ficus Moonshine is doing, even with the bright sunlight that I'm giving it, because, you know, I mean, if you take this leaf right here, you'll see that the dark green is not nearly as prominent as the lower leaves, but at the same time, it still has a pattern that really shows off the uniqueness of this Ficus Moonshine. So 3 leaves so far. Looks like I'm about to get a 4th leaf. This is an absolutely beautiful plant, and I'm hoping that maybe I'll get another foot of growth out of this one as well before the end of the growing season. Now I have to say that this is probably my most remarkable plant in the sense of how quickly it has grown since chopping off basically all of the growth points, all of the offshoots. I basically just left it bare. Since doing this, it has just really rewarded me with a lot of growth, and the leaves, interestingly enough, got big fairly quickly. So this is the Ficus altissima yellow gem, and these plants are really great if you're looking for something that is extremely fast growing, as well as something that will offer you really cool, interesting, unique, vibrant color within your house. Obviously, this is outside now, but the reason why I'm keeping it outside is because I'm trying to really help it bounce back and recover from being neglected for a little bit. These leaves aren't velvety like the Ficus Audrey, but nonetheless, they're still absolutely gorgeous. Now I have a lot of branching, which is expected and which is awesome. And it really doesn't look like I've had any kind of damage to the leaves from deer eating them. But I do want to go down here and just point out that I do have some growth that is starting to form at the base of the tree. And sometimes you'll get this, especially when you have a plant that's getting just a lot of light. What I want to do though is I'm actually going to pluck these off because I'm not interested in having a tree that is bushy. I want a tree that looks like a tree. So let's see, I'm going to go probably about to this point here, and then we'll just continue to monitor it. I'm really hoping that these buds right here, as you can see, will continue to push out growth, or will start to push out growth. But this Ficus altissima is just absolutely amazing. And you can just see, again, the reason why I love trees that have all of these active branching points is because if you do have these leaves with all of these active branching points, you basically have a new leaf or unfurling every single day. So absolutely beautiful, the Ficus altissima yellow gem. So the week 10 update is now in the books. I'm really happy for the most part with what all of my ficuses have done since giving it the big chop, but I am disappointed with how some of these plants have performed over the past week and a half. I do think that in about a month and a half, once the heat starts to cool down a little bit, then I'm going to get that explosion of growth that I got at the beginning of the growing season. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. My name is Brad, and I'll see you next week when I give you the week 11 update of what all of my ficuses look like since giving them the big chop.